In the shadowy depths of a forgotten English manor, a gleaming locket hides a deadly secret that could unravel lives forever. Poisoned love, betrayal, and murder most foul. Welcome to The Forgotten Locket, Love's Fatal Secret, a Hercule Poirot mystery that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Grab a cup of tea, settle in, and let the intrigue unfold. If you're hooked on this tale of twists and turns, hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Invitation. The autumn wind howled through the ancient oaks surrounding Blackwood Manor, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of a sleepy English village, where secrets seemed to whisper from every creaking floorboard. It was here, in the year 1925, that our story begins with the arrival of a peculiar invitation, one that would draw the world's greatest detective, Hercule Poirot, into a web of deception and death. Picture the scene. The manor's grand hall, adorned with faded portraits of stern ancestors, their eyes following every movement as if judging the living. Lady Eleanor Blackwood, a woman of striking beauty in her mid-40s, with raven hair pinned elegantly and a gown of deep crimson silk, paced nervously by the fireplace. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a cream-coloured envelope sealed with an unfamiliar wax crest, a locket entwined with thorns. Who could have sent this? She murmured to herself, her voice echoing softly in the empty room. The invitation inside was simple, yet ominous. Join us for a weekend of revelations at Blackwood Manor. Old debts must be settled. Come alone. No signature, no explanation, just an air of inevitability that sent a chill down her spine. Lady Eleanor wasn't alone in receiving such a missive. Across London and the countryside, 5 other guests had been summoned in the same cryptic manner. There was Sir Reginald Thorne, a wealthy industrialist with a reputation for ruthless business dealings, his face weathered by years of cutthroat negotiations and hidden scandals. He read the invitation in his opulent study, cigar smoke curling around him like a shroud, and chuckled darkly. "Someone's playing games," he said aloud, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Then came Miss Amelia Hart, a young actress whose star was rising on the West End stage, her vibrant red curls and infectious laugh masking a past she'd rather forget. She found the envelope slipped under her dressing-room door after a performance, and her heart raced as she wondered if her old flames had caught up with her. Dr. Victor Lang, a reserved physician with a penchant for exotic poisons from his travels in India, received his while tending to patients in his Harley Street clinic. He adjusted his spectacles and frowned, recalling long-buried experiments that could ruin him. Mrs. Beatrice Croft, a sharp-tongued widow known for her society gossip columns, smirked at the note over afternoon tea, her mind already spinning webs of who might be behind it. And finally, young Mr. Julian Blackwood, Lady Eleanor's nephew and heir to the manor, who had been squandering his allowance in Parisian casinos. He stared at the invitation in his cramped flat, sweat beading on his forehead, knowing his gambling debts were no longer secret. As the guests converged on Blackwood Manor that foggy Friday evening, the air was thick with anticipation and unspoken suspicions. Carriages pulled up one by one to the gravel driveway, lanterns flickering like wary eyes in the dusk. Lady Eleanor greeted them at the door, her composure a fragile mask. "Welcome all," she said with forced warmth, leading them into the drawing-room where a roaring fire did little to dispel the chill. The room was a testament to faded glory. Velvet drapes heavy with dust, a grand piano silent in the corner, and shelves lined with leather-bound books that smelled of age and neglect. Servants moved like shadows, serving sherry in canapes, but their eyes darted nervously, as if they too sensed the storm brewing. It was during this uneasy gathering that Hercule Poirot made his entrance, though not as an invited guest. The little Belgian detective, with his immaculate moustache, egg-shaped head and piercing grey eyes, had been consulted earlier that day by Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard. "Poirot, old chap," Japp had said over the telephone. "There's something fishy about this weekend party at Blackwood Manor. Anonymous invitations. A group with murky connections. Smells like trouble. Keep an eye on it, will you?" Poirot, ever the enthusiast for puzzles of the human mind, had agreed, arriving unannounced under the guise of a distant acquaintance. "Mon ami," he said to Lady Eleanor with a bow, "I hope you do not mind an extra pair of little grey cells at your disposal." She hesitated but nodded, perhaps relieved to have someone of his calibre amid the tension. As the group settled around the fire, conversations flowed haltingly, laced with polite inquiries that masked deeper probes. Sir Reginald boasted of his latest factory acquisition, but his gaze lingered too long on Lady Eleanor, hinting at a shared history. Miss Amelia laughed brightly at a joke, yet her fingers toyed anxiously with a silver bracelet. Dr. Lang spoke quietly of his medical research, avoiding eye contact, while Mrs. Croft dropped sly comments about old flames and forgotten trinkets that made Julian shift uncomfortably in his seat. Lady Eleanor, trying to steer the talk, mentioned the manor's history, a place built on love stories turned tragic, including her own marriage to the late Lord Blackwood, who had died mysteriously 5 years prior from what was ruled a heart attack, though whispers of poison persisted. The evening took a darker turn when, after dinner, a sudden scream pierced the air. It came from the library, where Julian had wandered to fetch a book. Rushing in, the guests found him pale and pointing at the desk. There, atop a stack of yellowed letters, lay an antique gold locket, its chain broken as if torn in haste. Inside, a faded photograph of a young woman, not Lady Eleanor, and on the back, engraved words, "Eternal love, eternal curse." This belonged to my uncle," Julian stammered. "But it was lost years ago, buried with him, or so we thought." The group exchanged glances, the air electric with suspicion. Who had placed it there? And why now? Poirot, observing from the doorway, stroked his moustache thoughtfully. "Ah, mes amis," he said softly. "The locket, it is not forgotten. It is a key, non, to secrets long hidden." He examined it closely, noting a faint residue on the chain, perhaps a clue. As the guests murmured in shock, Lady Eleanor clutched her throat, her face ashen. "This can't be," she whispered. "It brings back everything." The doctor offered her a sedative, but she refused, insisting they all retire for the night. Yet sleep would elude them, for the manor's walls seemed to close in, harbouring ghosts of betrayal. In the quiet hours that followed, Poirot paced his guest room, his mind a whirlwind of deductions. The invitations, the Locket's reappearance, they pointed to a mastermind among them, orchestrating a revelation of past sins. Was it revenge for a jilted lover, a covered-up murder, or something more sinister, tied to the Blackwood fortune? He recalled similar cases, like the one in Styles where poison masqueraded as illness, and vowed to unravel this before blood was spilled. As dawn broke, casting pale light through the manor's leaded windows, the guests awoke to another shock. Sir Reginald was found slumped in his armchair, lifeless, a glass of whisky spilled at his feet. No visible wounds, but his lips were tinged blue, classic signs of poison. Poirot knelt beside the body, sniffing the glass. "Cyanide without doubt," he declared to the horrified assembly. Inspector Japp arrived soon after, summoned by a frantic telegram, but it was clear the killer was among them. "Lock the doors," Japp ordered. "No one leaves until we sort this." With the stage set for interrogation and alibis, the mystery deepened. Lady Eleanor confessed to a long-ago affair with Sir Reginald, ended bitterly when he chose wealth over love. Miss Amelia admitted knowing him from theatre circles, where he'd invested and lost fortunes. Dr. Lang's expertise in poisons made him suspect, while Mrs. Croft hinted at blackmail letters she'd seen. Julian, sweating profusely, denied everything but couldn't account for his whereabouts during the night. Poirot gathered them in the drawing room, his eyes sharp. "The locket, it is the heart of this," he said. "It holds not just a picture, but a fatal secret. Someone here knows what that is." Tensions rose as accusations flew. Amelia pointed at Julian, claiming he'd argued with Sir Reginald over debts. Beatrice suggested Eleanor's jealousy, but Poirot silenced them. "Patience, mes amis. The little grey cells, they work." As the chapter closes on this grim discovery, the manor feels like a trap, each guest a potential victim or villain. What poisoned love lingers in the locket's shadow? Hold tight, for the revelations are just beginning, leading us seamlessly into the tangled web of alibis and hidden motives in the next part of our tale. Chapter 2. The Tangled Web of Alibis. The morning mist clung to Blackwood Manor like a shroud, its grey tendrils curling around the ivy-covered walls as if guarding the secrets within. In the drawing room, the air was heavy with suspicion, the guests seated in a tense semicircle around Hercule Poirot and Inspector Japp. The fire crackled weakly, doing little to warm the chill of Sir Reginald's death. His body had been moved to a guest room under Japp's orders, but the image of his blue-tinged lips lingered in everyone's minds. Poirot stood before the group, his small frame commanding attention, his eyes scanning each face like a hawk circling prey. "Mes amis," he began, his voice calm but firm. "A murder has been committed, and the killer is among us. Let us examine the alibis, for they will reveal the cracks in this carefully woven tapestry of deceit." Inspector Japp, notebook in hand, took charge of the questioning, his gruff demeanour a contrast to Poirot's polished precision. He started with Lady Eleanor, whose crimson gown from the previous night had been replaced by a sombre grey dress, her face pale but composed. "Where were you between midnight and 2 a.m., Lady Blackwood?" Japp asked, pencil poised. She clasped her hands tightly, her emerald ring glinting in the dim light. "I was in my room, Inspector," she replied, her voice steady. "I couldn't sleep after that locket appeared. I heard nothing unusual." Japp raised an eyebrow but moved on, noting her solitude offered no witnesses. Next was Miss Amelia Hart, her red curls now pinned haphazardly, her eyes darting nervously. "I was in my room too," she said quickly, her voice high-pitched. "I was practicing lines for my next play, you see, and I must have dozed off by the window." Poirot tilted his head, observing the faint smudge of rouge on her cheek, as if she'd neglected to remove her stage makeup. "And did you hear perhaps a footstep, a creak, mademoiselle?" he asked. Amelia shook her head vigorously, but her fingers twisted the silver bracelet on her wrist, betraying her unease. Dr. Victor Lang sat rigidly, his spectacles reflecting the firelight. "I was in the library," he admitted, his tone measured. "I couldn't sleep either, so I went to read some of the manor's old medical texts. Fascinating collection, really." Japp frowned. "The library, where that locket was found. Convenient, Doctor." Lang's jaw tightened, but he offered no rebuttal, only a curt nod. Poirot noted the man's steady hands, hands that could handle a syringe or a vial of poison with ease. Mrs. Beatrice Croft, her lips pursed in a smug smile, leaned back in her armchair, a shawl draped over her shoulders. "I was writing in my journal," she said, her voice dripping with confidence. "In my room, of course. I always document society events, such rich material for my column." She cast a sly glance at the others, as if daring them to challenge her. Poirot's moustache twitched. He knew her pen was as sharp as her tongue, and her journal might hold more than gossip. Young Julian Blackwood, his face flushed and collar askew, was the last to speak. "I was in the billiard room," he stammered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Couldn't sleep, so I played a few rounds alone. Didn't hear a thing." Japp scribbled furiously, muttering, "Alone, eh? No one to vouch for you, lad." Julian's eyes darted to Lady Eleanor, but she looked away, her expression unreadable. As the alibis were laid bare, Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. Each of you claims solitude, he mused. Yet someone moved through these halls last night, silent as a shadow, to deliver death to Sir Reginald. The poison, it was administered with precision. Cyanide in his whiskey, no? We must consider the means. He turned to Dr. Lang. Monsieur, your knowledge of poisons is well known. Could you enlighten us on cyanide's properties? Lang adjusted his spectacles, his voice clinical. It's swift, odorless in small doses, and deadly. A few drops in a drink would suffice. But I assure you, I keep no such thing. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. Jap, growing impatient, decided to search the guest rooms for evidence. The group followed reluctantly, their footsteps echoing through the manor's cavernous halls. In Sir Reginald's room, they found his suitcase half unpacked, a silver cigarette case, and a crumpled letter tucked into his jacket pocket. Jap unfolded it carefully, revealing a scrawled note. You can't hide forever. The Locket knows. The handwriting matched none of the invitations, but the mention of the Locket sent a ripple of tension through the group. Amelia gasped softly, and Julian turned pale, gripping the doorframe. Poirot's attention shifted to the whiskey decanter in the drawing room, still half full on a side table. He sniffed it cautiously, confirming the faint bitter almond scent of cyanide. This decanter, he said, was it touched by the servants? The butler, a wiry man named Hawkins, stepped forward, his face drawn. I filled it yesterday afternoon, sir, and no one touched it after dinner. I swear it. Poirot's gaze lingered on Hawkins, noting his nervous fidgeting. A servant with access to the drinks could be more than he seemed. As the search continued, Mrs. Croft's room yielded a curious find, a scrap of paper in her waste bin, bearing the words Reginald's debts in her neat cursive. She shrugged when confronted, claiming it was research for her column, but her smirk faltered under Poirot's scrutiny. In Amelia's room, a hidden photograph was found beneath her pillow. A younger Sir Reginald, with a woman who resembled the one in the locket. An old keepsake, Amelia said quickly, her cheeks flushing. He gave it to me years ago, before I made it big. Poirot pocketed the photograph, his mind cataloguing connections. The morning wore on, and whispers of distrust grew louder. Julian cornered Amelia in the hallway, his voice low and urgent. What did you tell them about Reginald? You know something, don't you? She pulled away, her eyes flashing. Don't drag me into your mess, Julian. You're the one who owed him money. Their argument was cut short by Jap's shout from the library. A small vial, empty but reeking of almonds, was found behind a bookshelf. Dr. Lang's face drained of colour, but he insisted it wasn't his. Anyone could have placed it there, he protested, though his voice lacked conviction. Poirot gathered the group once more, his demeanour calm, but his words sharp. The locket, the note, the vial. These are threads in a larger design. Someone here weaves a story of revenge, perhaps for love betrayed or a debt unpaid. But we are not yet at the truth. He paused, his eyes locking onto each guest in turn. Tonight we dine together, and I, Poirot, will watch. The killer will betray themselves, for no one can hide from the little grey cells forever. As the group dispersed, the manor seemed to pulse with unease, its shadows lengthening with the fading light. The stage was set for another evening of secrets, where every glance and gesture would be a clue. The mystery of the locket tightened its grip, pulling us deeper into the labyrinth of motives and lies, where the next revelation awaits just beyond the candlelight. Chapter 3. Shadows at the Dinner Table. The dining room of Blackwood Manor glowed under the flicker of a grand chandelier, its crystals casting fractured light across the long mahogany table set for dinner. The air was thick with the scent of roasted pheasant and claret, but the elegance of the meal did little to ease the tension that hung like a storm cloud over the guests. Hercule Poirot sat at one end, his sharp eyes darting between the faces of Lady Eleanor, Miss Amelia Hart, Dr. Victor Lang, Mrs. Beatrice Croft, and young Julian Blackwood, each seated with rigid postures, their silverware clinking nervously against fine china. Inspector Japp stood by the door, arms crossed, his presence a grim reminder that a murderer dined among them. The locket, now locked away in Japp's evidence case, seemed to loom in their thoughts, its secrets poisoning the atmosphere as surely as cyanide had ended Sir Reginald's life. Lady Eleanor, as hostess, tried to maintain a facade of civility, her voice soft but strained as she offered more wine. "We mustn't let this tragedy spoil our evening," she said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. Across the table, Amelia toyed with her food, her fork tracing patterns in the sauce, her earlier vivacity replaced by a quiet unease. Dr. Lang ate methodically, his gaze fixed on his plate, while Mrs. Croft, ever the observer, watched the others with a glint of curiosity, her lips curling as if she were composing her next column in her head. Julian, seated nearest the window, kept glancing at the darkened panes, as if expecting a spectre to emerge from the night. Poirot, savouring a sip of wine, broke the silence with deliberate calm. "Mes amis, a dinner such as this is more than nourishment, it is a stage for truth. Let us speak of motives, no? Sir Reginald, he was a man of wealth, yes, but also of enemies." His words hung in the air, and the guests shifted uncomfortably. Amelia's fork froze mid-air, and Julian's glass nearly slipped from his hand. Poirot continued. "Who among you had reason to wish him harm? A business deal gone sour? A heart broken long ago?" His gaze lingered on Lady Eleanor, whose fingers tightened around her napkin. Mrs. Croft seized the moment, her voice sharp with mischief. "Well, Eleanor, you did know Reginald quite intimately, didn't you? Before your marriage, I mean." The room stilled, forks pausing, breaths held. Lady Eleanor's face flushed, but she met Croft's eyes with defiance. "That was years ago, Beatrice, and hardly a secret. My heart belonged to my husband. Rest his soul." Her voice wavered on the last words, and Poirot noted the flicker of grief, or was it guilt, in her expression. Dr. Lang cleared his throat, his tone clipped. "If we're pointing fingers, let's not forget Julian. Everyone knew Reginald was pressing him for those gambling debts. Quite a motive, I'd say." Julian's face reddened, and he slammed his fist on the table, rattling the cutlery. "That's a lie. I was sorting it out. I didn't need to do anything drastic." His outburst drew a raised eyebrow from Japp, who jotted something in his notebook. Amelia, perhaps eager to deflect, spoke up, her voice trembling. "What about that locket? It's connected to all this, isn't it? I mean, it was Reginald's, from years ago before he got rich. Maybe someone from his past." She trailed off, her eyes darting to Poirot, who nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed, mademoiselle," he said. "The locket is a whisper from history, but whose history? We must dig deeper." As the meal progressed, the butler, Hawkins, moved silently, refilling glasses and clearing plates. Poirot's eyes followed him, noting the man's deft movements and the way his gaze lingered on the guests, particularly Lady Eleanor. Was it loyalty or something more? Poirot recalled a case in London where a servant's quiet resentment had turned deadly, and he resolved to question Hawkins later. The conversation turned to the manor's past, prompted by Poirot's gentle probing. Lady Eleanor spoke of her late husband, Lord Blackwood, whose death had left her alone to manage the estate. "He was a kind man," she said, "but troubled by old debts and promises. That locket, it was his mother's, or so he told me." Her voice caught, and she excused herself briefly, claiming a headache. Poirot watched her go, wondering what truths she carried up the grand staircase. In her absence, Mrs. Croft leaned forward, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "You know, I heard rumours years ago about Lord Blackwood's death. Not a heart attack, some said, but something slipped into his tea. Convenient for Eleanor, inheriting all this." Amelia gasped, and Dr. Lang's fork clattered to his plate. Julian, his face pale, muttered, "That's nonsense. My uncle wasn't murdered." But his eyes betrayed doubt, and Poirot's mind raced, connecting the locket to another possible crime. The dinner was interrupted by a sudden crash from the hallway. Japp sprang to his feet, followed by the others, and they found a shattered vase on the floor, its fragments scattered like broken promises. Hawkins appeared, apologetic, claiming he'd bumped into it while carrying linens, but Poirot crouched by the debris, noticing a small key half hidden among the shards. He slipped it into his pocket without a word, his mind turning over its significance. A key to what? A locked drawer, a hidden safe, or another secret altogether? Returning to the dining room, the group's nerves were frayed. Amelia, emboldened by wine, accused Mrs. Croft of stirring trouble. "You're always poking into people's lives, Beatrice. Maybe you know more about that locket than you're letting on." Croft laughed, unfazed. "My dear, I only write what I see, and I see plenty." Her words hung like a challenge, and Poirot noted the tension between the women, a potential thread to pull later. As dessert was served, a rich plum pudding that no one touched, Poirot steered the conversation to the cryptic note found in Sir Reginald's pocket. "The locket knows," it said, he mused aloud. "What does it know, I wonder? A betrayal, perhaps, or a debt that could not be repaid in coin?" His eyes scanned the table, catching Julian's flinch and Lang's sudden stillness. The doctor spoke up, his voice low. "Some debts are paid in silence, Monsieur Poirot. Not all secrets need blood." The cryptic remark drew a sharp look from Japp, but Poirot merely smiled, filing it away. The meal ended with no further incidents, but the atmosphere was electric with unspoken accusations. As the guests rose to retire, Poirot caught Lady Eleanor's arm gently. "Madame, a word," he said. In the quiet of the hallway he asked, "The locket, was it truly your husband's mother's? Or is there another tale?" She hesitated, her eyes searching his, then whispered, "It was a gift to me long ago from someone I loved before my husband. I thought it lost forever." Her confession hung between them, a new piece of the puzzle. As the guests dispersed to their rooms, the manor creaked under the weight of its secrets, the night promising more revelations. Poirot, clutching the mysterious key, felt the threads of the mystery tightening. The locket's shadow stretched further, hinting at a deeper betrayal, and the next chapter of this deadly game was about to unfold in the quiet hours before dawn. Chapter 4. The Key to the Past. The moon hung low over Blackwood Manor, its pale light filtering through the tall windows, casting eerie patterns on the walls, as if the house itself were whispering clues. Hercule Poirot sat alone in his guest room, the small key from the shattered vase glinting in his palm. Its intricate design, a tiny rose etched into the metal, suggested it unlocked something of significance, perhaps a box or a drawer tied to the locket's deadly secret. The manor was silent, save for the occasional creak of settling wood, but Poirot's mind buzzed with questions. The cyanide, the cryptic note, Lady Eleanor's confession about the locket's origins, each was a thread in a tapestry of betrayal, and this key might unravel it further. He resolved to explore the manor's hidden corners before the killer struck again. As dawn approached, Poirot slipped into the hallway, his steps muffled by the thick Persian rugs. The manor's labyrinthine corridors seemed to pulse with secrets, portraits of long-dead Blackwoods staring down with disapproval. He began in the library, where the locket had first reappeared. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp, its shelves heavy with dusty tomes and forgotten ledgers. Poirot's fingers traced the edges of a large oak desk, its drawers locked tight. He tested the key, and with a soft click, the top drawer opened, revealing a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, and the signature at the bottom read, "Clara." The letters spoke of a forbidden romance, promises of eternal love, and hints of a scandal that could ruin reputations. One line stood out, "The locket is my vow, But it must remain hidden, lest it destroy us both. Poirot's moustache twitched. Clara, whoever she was a new piece of the puzzle. His investigation was interrupted by a soft thud from upstairs. Moving swiftly, Poirot followed the sound to the second floor, where a narrow staircase led to the attic. The door was ajar, and inside he found Miss Amelia Hart, her red curls dishevelled, rummaging through a trunk filled with old gowns and trinkets. She gasped, dropping a tarnished silver mirror. "Monsieur Poirot, I couldn't sleep," she stammered. "I thought there might be something here. Something about that locket." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And what, mademoiselle, do you seek in the dust of the past?" Amelia hesitated, then admitted, "I knew Clara, the woman in the Locket's photograph. She was my sister. She disappeared years ago, after a row with Sir Reginald." Her voice broke, and Poirot's eyes softened, though his mind raced. A missing sister tied to Reginald, and perhaps to the Locket's curse. Leaving Amelia to compose herself, Poirot returned to the library to examine the letters further. The dates placed them over 20 years ago, before Lady Eleanor's marriage to Lord Blackwood. Clara, it seemed, had been her rival for another's affection, possibly Sir Reginald's. The letters hinted at a betrayal, a love triangle that ended in tragedy. Poirot pocketed one letter, intending to confront Lady Eleanor later, but his thoughts were cut short by a commotion downstairs. Inspector Japp's voice boomed through the hall, summoning the guests to the drawing room. "We've got another problem!" he shouted. The group assembled, bleary-eyed and tense, as Japp held up a small leather-bound diary found in Dr. Lang's room during a second search. Its pages detailed experiments with poisons, including a recipe for cyanide distillation, written in Lang's precise hand. "Care to explain this, Doctor?" Japp demanded. Lang's face remained impassive, though his fingers twitched. "It's research, Inspector, from my time in India. I study poisons to save lives, not end them." His calm was unnerving, but Poirot noted a bead of sweat on his brow. Mrs. Croft, ever eager to stir the pot, chimed in. "Research, or a blueprint for murder? You were in the library that night, near the Locket." Before Lang could respond, the butler, Hawkins, entered, his face pale. "Sir, there's something you should see," he said to Japp, leading the group to the conservatory. There, among the wilting ferns and glass panes, lay a single glove, black silk, embroidered with a rose matching the key's design. Lady Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's mine," she whispered, "but I haven't worn it in years." Poirot knelt, examining the glove, and detected a faint chemical scent, possibly cyanide residue. "Madame," he said softly, "this glove, it was not lost by accident, I think." Her eyes widened, but she said nothing, her silence louder than any protest. The discovery fueled fresh accusations. Julian, emboldened by fear, pointed at Dr. Lang. "You're the poison expert, and now Eleanor's glove. You're framing her!" Lang's eyes flashed with anger, but he remained silent. Amelia, still shaken from her attic encounter, murmured, "What if Clara's death wasn't an accident? What if someone here knows what happened to her?" Her words hung heavy, and Poirot's mind turned to the Locket's engraving. Eternal love, eternal curse. Was Clara's disappearance the curse's origin? As the group returned to the drawing room, Poirot gathered them around the fireplace, the key now heavy in his pocket. "Mes amis," he said, his voice steady. "The locket, the glove, the letters. They point to a wound from long ago, one that festers still. Clara, she is the ghost in this mystery, non? We must learn her fate." He watched their reactions. Eleanor's trembling hands, Lang's rigid posture, Croft's sly smile, Julian's nervous fidgeting, and Amelia's tearful gaze. Each held a piece of the truth, but the killer's hand was still hidden. Japp, growing restless, announced plans to interrogate the servants, suspecting Hawkins might know more than he let on. Poirot agreed but urged caution. The heart of this crime is not only in the present, Inspector, but in the shadows of the past. We must tread carefully, lest we disturb the wrong ghost. As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his thoughts on Clara's letters and the glove's implication. The Manor's secrets were piling up, each clue a step closer to the truth or to another death. The day waned, and the Manor's atmosphere grew heavier, as if the walls themselves anticipated the next blow. Poirot clutched the key, knowing it unlocked more than a drawer. It held the power to expose a murderer. The Locket's curse was tightening its grip, and the next chapter of this deadly drama was poised to unfold in the flickering candlelight of Blackwood Manor. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Dark. The night settled over Blackwood Manor like a heavy velvet curtain, muffling the world outside but amplifying the unease within. The grand clock in the hall struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the silent corridors as Hercule Poirot moved stealthily toward the servants' quarters. The key with the rose etching and Clara's letters weighed heavily in his mind, each a fragment of a puzzle that pointed to a long-buried truth. The glove, scented with the faint trace of cyanide, suggested a deliberate attempt to implicate Lady Eleanor. But Poirot's little grey cells whispered that the truth was more complex. Tonight, he sought answers from the one person who moved unseen through the Manor's drama, the butler, Hawkins. The servants' quarters, tucked in a narrow wing behind the kitchen, were dimly lit by a single oil lamp. Hawkins sat at a small table, polishing silver with mechanical precision, his gaunt face etched with fatigue. Poirot knocked softly, and the butler started, his eyes narrowing. "Monsieur Poirot, it's late," he said, his voice low. Poirot smiled, his manner disarming. "Oui, but secrets, they do not sleep, Monsieur Hawkins. Tell me, what do you know of Clara, the woman tied to the locket?" Hawkins' hands stilled, and for a moment, his composure cracked. "Clara, she was a maid here, years ago, left suddenly before the master's death. I know nothing more." His words were too quick, and Poirot noted the tremor in his voice. Pressing further, Poirot mentioned the glove. Hawkins' eyes widened briefly before he regained control. "Lady Eleanor's glove? I saw her wear it long ago, when she was younger, before her marriage. She kept it in a memory box, I think." The butler's knowledge of such a detail was telling, and Poirot filed it away, suspecting Hawkins had seen more than he admitted. As Poirot turned to leave, Hawkins added, almost too casually, "You might check the old greenhouse, sir. Clara used to tend the flowers there." The suggestion felt like a breadcrumb, and Poirot resolved to follow it. Under the cover of darkness, Poirot made his way to the greenhouse, a glass structure half overgrown with ivy, its panes fogged with age. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying plants. Moonlight revealed rows of wilted roses, their thorns sharp despite their neglect. Poirot's flashlight swept the space, landing on a small wooden box hidden beneath a workbench, its lock bearing a rose design that matched his key. With a soft click, the box opened, revealing a delicate lace handkerchief and a faded photograph of a young woman, Clara, identical to the Locket's image, standing beside a younger Lady Eleanor, both smiling but with a tension in their eyes. A note tucked inside read, "Forgive me, E, but love demands sacrifice." The handwriting matched the letters from the library, confirming Clara's connection to Eleanor, and perhaps to the Manor's tragedies. As Poirot pocketed the note, a shadow moved outside, fleeting but deliberate. He stepped into the garden, his senses sharp, but found only a broken branch and footprints in the soft earth, too large for Amelia, too small for Julian. Someone was watching, and Poirot's pulse quickened at the thought of the killer closing in. Returning to the manor, he heard a muffled argument from the upstairs hall. Creeping closer, He overheard Mrs. Beatrice Croft and Dr. Victor Lang in a heated exchange. "You knew about Clara's experiments, didn't you?" Croft hissed. "Those poisons you studied together in India." Lang's voice was low, furious. "Keep your voice down, Beatrice. That was research, nothing more. You're fishing for scandals." Their words hinted at a deeper connection to Clara, and Poirot made a mental note to probe Lang's past further. By morning, the guests gathered in the parlour, summoned by Inspector Japp, who looked haggard from a sleepless night. He revealed a new discovery. A hidden panel in Sir Reginald's room, uncovered during a thorough search, containing a ledger detailing payments to someone named C over 20 years ago. The amounts were substantial, suggesting blackmail or a secret deal. "This C could be Clara," Japp said, eyeing the group. Amelia's face crumpled, and she whispered, "My sister wouldn't blackmail anyone. She was kind, too kind." Julian, pacing nervously, snapped, "Then why's her name everywhere?" "Someone's dragging her into this!" His outburst drew suspicious glances, and Poirot observed his clenched fists, wondering if guilt or fear drove his anger. Lady Eleanor, pale and drawn, spoke up. "Clara was my friend, not just a maid. We were close until she left. I never knew why." Her voice faltered, and Poirot sensed she was holding back. He produced the handkerchief from the greenhouse, watching her reaction. "This, madame, was found with Clara's photograph. You recognize it, no?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "It was hers. She gave it to me before she vanished." "I thought she'd run off with someone." Her words carried a mix of sorrow and evasion, and Poirot wondered if she knew more about Clara's fate. Mrs. Croft, sensing an opportunity, leaned forward. "Vanished or was made to vanish? Someone in this house knows what happened to her, and I'd wager it's tied to that locket." Her accusations sparked tension, with Dr. Lang glaring and Julian muttering under his breath. Japp, frustrated, announced he'd send for Clara's old records from the village, hoping to trace her last movements. Poirot, however, focused on the present, his eyes on Hawkins, who lingered at the parlour's edge. His expression unreadable as the group dispersed. Poirot caught Amelia alone, her hands trembling as she clutched a cup of tea. "Mademoiselle, your sister's story is the key," he said gently. "If you know anything more, you must tell Poirot." Amelia hesitated, then whispered, "She wrote me once, before she disappeared. She said she'd found something dangerous, something about the Blackwood family. She was scared." Her words confirmed Poirot's suspicions. Clara's disappearance was no accident, and the locket held the truth. The manor's shadows seemed to deepen as the day wore on, each clue tightening the noose around the killer's identity. Poirot, clutching the photograph and note, felt the weight of Clara's ghost guiding his investigation. The greenhouse, the payments, the whispered arguments, all pointed to a conspiracy rooted in love and betrayal. As the next chapter loomed, the manor braced for another revelation, its secrets poised to spill like blood in the flickering light of truth. Chapter 6. The ghost of Clara's truth. The afternoon sun struggled to pierce the heavy clouds over Blackwood Manor, casting a muted glow through the tall windows of the study where Hercule Poirot sat, poring over Clara's photograph and the note from the greenhouse. The words, "Love demands sacrifice," echoed in his mind, a haunting clue to a tragedy that seemed to bind the guests in a web of guilt and fear. The manor's oppressive silence was broken only by the distant clatter of Inspector Japp's men searching the grounds for further evidence. Poirot's little grey cells churned, piecing together the fragments. Clara's disappearance, the locket's reappearance, the poisoned whiskey, and now the mysterious payments to C. The truth was close, but it danced just out of reach, hidden in the shadows of the past. Poirot decided to confront Dr. Victor Lang, whose expertise in poisons and connection to Clara's experiments in India raised suspicions. He found the doctor in the conservatory, examining the wilted roses with an intensity that seemed out of place. "Monsieur Lang," Poirot began, his voice soft but piercing. "You knew Clara well, did you not? In India, perhaps, where you studied the art of poisons together." Lang's hand froze on a thorned stem, his spectacles glinting as he turned. "We worked together briefly, yes," he admitted, his tone guarded. "She was curious, brilliant even, but reckless. She left India abruptly, and I never saw her again." His words were measured, but Poirot detected a flicker of unease in his eyes, as if Lang feared what Clara might have left behind. Before Poirot could press further, a shout from the garden drew their attention. Japp emerged, holding a muddy gardening trowel, its blade stained with a dark, sticky residue. "Found this buried near the greenhouse," he announced to the gathered guests, who had been summoned to the lawn. "Smells like it's been in contact with something chemical, possibly cyanide." The group exchanged uneasy glances, and Mrs. Beatrice Croft's voice cut through the tension. "Well, well, Doctor, weren't you just in the conservatory? Awfully close to the greenhouse, wouldn't you say?" Lang's jaw tightened, but he replied coolly, "I'm a physician, not a gardener, Mrs. Croft. I've no use for trowels." Poirot's attention shifted to Amelia Hart, who stood at the edge of the group, her face pale as she stared at the trowel. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, approaching her, "you mentioned Clara's fear of something dangerous in the Blackwood family. Did she ever speak of the garden, or of hiding something there?" Amelia's eyes welled with tears, and she nodded slowly. "Once, in a letter, she mentioned hiding something precious in the rose beds, where no one would look. I thought she meant a keepsake, not this." Her voice broke, and Poirot placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his mind racing. The trowel, the greenhouse, the rose-etched key. Clara's secrets were rooted in this garden. Determined to follow this lead, Poirot and Japp returned to the greenhouse, where the air felt heavier, as if Clara's presence lingered. They searched the rose beds, digging carefully among the thorns. Beneath a tangle of roots, they uncovered a small tin box, its surface rusted but intact. Inside was a single vial, empty but bearing traces of a crystalline powder. Cyanide, Poirot suspected, to be confirmed by Japp's laboratory. A folded note accompanied it, in Clara's handwriting. "If I am gone, the truth lies with the locket. Forgive me, Amelia." The note sent a chill through Poirot, confirming that Clara's disappearance was tied to the manor's dark history, and her death was no mere accident. Back in the drawing room, Poirot presented the note to the guests, watching their reactions closely. Lady Eleanor's hands trembled as she read it, her voice barely a whisper. Clara was trying to protect someone, wasn't she? But who? Julian, his face flushed with agitation, snapped. "This is getting out of hand. Why drag up Clara now? She's gone and Reginald's dead." His outburst drew a sharp look from Japp, who muttered, "You seem awfully eager to move on, lad." Mrs. Croft, her eyes gleaming, added, "Perhaps because Clara knew something about your uncle's death, Julian. Or yours, Eleanor." The accusation hung in the air, and Poirot seized the moment to redirect the conversation. "Madame Croft, you spoke of rumours about Lord Blackwood's death. Tell me, what did you hear of Clara's role in those days?" Croft hesitated, her usual confidence wavering. "Only whispers," she admitted. "Some said Clara was too close to Lord Blackwood, that she knew things about his business dealings. Debts, perhaps, or worse. When she vanished, the gossip died with her." Poirot's moustache twitched. The payments to C in Reginald's ledger might not have been blackmail, but a cover for something deeper, perhaps tied to Lord Blackwood's demise. As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered with Japp, sharing his theory. "Inspector, consider this. Clara discovered a secret, one that threatened the Blackwood family. She hid evidence, the locket, the vial, to protect someone, or to expose them. Her disappearance was orchestrated, and now someone seeks to silence those who know." Japp nodded grimly. "Then we're looking for a killer who's been planning this for years." "But who?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The answer lies with the locket's owner, and I believe we are close to finding them." As evening fell, The manor's atmosphere grew taut, each creak and shadow a reminder of the danger lurking within. Poirot slipped the tin box's note into his pocket, its words a beacon guiding him toward Clara's truth. The guests retired to their rooms, but sleep was a distant hope, for the killer was watching, waiting for the next move. The Locket's curse was unraveling, and the next chapter promised to bring the past crashing into the present as Poirot's deductions closed in on the heart of the mystery. Chapter 7. The Locket's Keeper. The twilight draped Blackwood Manor in a cloak of unease, its ancient walls seeming to lean inward as if guarding the secrets they held. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, the tin box's note and Clara's photograph spread before him on the oak desk. The words, "The truth lies with the locket," burned in his mind, a challenge to uncover the identity of its true keeper. The vial of cyanide residue, the rose-etched key, and the payments to C pointed to a conspiracy rooted in betrayal. But the motive remained elusive. Was it love, revenge, or greed that drove the killer to strike now, after years of silence? Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, sensing the answer was within reach, hidden in the tangled relationships of the manor's past. Determined to trace the Locket's origins, Poirot sought out Lady Eleanor, finding her in the music room, seated at the grand piano, her fingers resting on the keys without playing. The room was bathed in the soft glow of a single candelabrum, casting long shadows across her weary face. "Madame," Poirot said gently, "you told me the locket was a gift from a past love, not your husband's mother. Who was this man, and what did Clara know of him?" Eleanor's hands trembled, and she drew a shaky breath. "It was Reginald," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "Before I married Lord Blackwood, Reginald and I were engaged. He gave me the locket, but when he broke it off for a wealthier match, I gave it to Clara, my closest friend, to keep safe. She promised to guard it." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and Poirot nodded, piecing together the locket's journey. The revelation shifted the puzzle's shape. If Clara had held the locket, her disappearance might have been tied to its significance. Not just a token of love, but a symbol of a broken promise. Poirot pressed further. "And Clara's departure, madam, did it follow a quarrel or a threat?" Eleanor hesitated, then whispered, "She came to me one night, frantic, saying she'd seen something in the manor, something dangerous. She wouldn't say what, only that she had to leave. I never saw her again." Her words confirmed Amelia's account of Clara's fear, but Poirot sensed Eleanor was still withholding a crucial detail. His thoughts were interrupted by a commotion outside. Inspector Japp burst into the room, his face grim. "We've got a problem, Poirot. Julian's gone missing." The guests were summoned to the drawing room, where Japp explained that Julian's room was empty, his coat and boots gone. A search of the grounds was underway, but the fog rolling in from the moors made it perilous. Mrs. Beatrice Croft, her shawl clutched tightly, smirked. "Run off, has he? Guilty conscience, I'd wager." Amelia, her voice sharp with worry, retorted, "Or he's in danger. Someone's picking us off one by one." Dr. Victor Lang remained silent, his eyes fixed on the floor, but Poirot noted his clenched jaw, a sign of suppressed emotion. Determined to act, Poirot led Japp and the butler, Hawkins, to search the manor's upper floors, suspecting Julian might be hiding rather than fled. In the attic, among cobwebbed trunks and forgotten relics, they found a crumpled note in Julian's handwriting tucked inside a dusty ledger. It read, "I know what Clara found. The locket proves it. I'm sorry, Aunt Eleanor." The note sent a chill through Poirot, suggesting Julian had uncovered a truth that put him in the killer's sights. Hawkins, lingering by the door, shifted uncomfortably, and Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Monsieur Hawkins, you knew Clara well, did you not? Perhaps you know what she discovered in this house?" The butler's face paled, but he shook his head. "I was just a servant, sir. I kept out of her business." His denial felt hollow. and Poirot resolved to watch him closely. As the search continued, a cry from the garden drew them outside. One of Japp's men had found Julian, unconscious but alive, slumped against a yew tree near the rose beds. His face was pale, his breathing shallow, and a faint, bitter almond scent clung to his lips. Another poisoning attempt, thwarted only by a smaller dose. Dr. Lang, summoned to examine him, administered a stimulant, muttering, "He's lucky, a few more minutes, and he'd be gone." Julian stirred, his eyes wild with fear, but he could only mumble, "The locket, it's cursed." Before slipping back into a fitful sleep, Poirot knelt beside him, his mind racing. The attack on Julian confirmed the killer's desperation to silence those who knew too much. The locket, Clara's note, and now Julian's cryptic words pointed to a secret so explosive it warranted murder. Poirot turned to Japp. "Inspector, we must guard Monsieur Julian closely. The killer grows bold, and the locket's truth is their target." Japp nodded, ordering his men to move Julian to a secure room under watch. As the group returned to the manor, Poirot gathered them in the parlour, his voice calm but commanding. "Mes amis, the locket is more than a jewel. It is a witness to a crime, one that Clara uncovered and paid for with her life. Someone here seeks to bury that truth forever." His eyes scanned the room. Eleanor's haunted gaze, Amelia's trembling hands, Lang's stoic silence, Croft's calculating smirk, and Hawkins' nervous fidgeting. Each was a piece of the puzzle, but the killer's identity remained shrouded. The night deepened, and the manor's walls seemed to close in, the air thick with the promise of another strike. Poirot clutched Julian's note, its words a beacon in the darkness. The locket's keeper was among them, and the truth of Clara's fate was about to surface, pulling the next chapter into a deadly dance of revelation and danger. Chapter 8. The Unravelling Thread. The fog clung to Blackwood Manor like a conspirator, its tendrils seeping through cracked windows as the night grew colder. In a small upstairs room, Julian Blackwood lay under a heavy quilt, his breathing steadier, but his face still pale from the near-fatal dose of cyanide. Hercule Poirot stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the moonlit mist, his mind dissecting the note found in the attic. "I know what Clara found. The locket proves it." The word suggested Julian had stumbled onto a secret so dangerous it nearly cost him his life. The locket, Clara's disappearance, and the murders were threads in a tapestry Poirot was determined to unravel before another life was claimed. With Inspector Japp guarding Julian, Poirot descended to the drawing room, where the remaining guests, Lady Eleanor, Miss Amelia Hart, Dr. Victor Lang, and Mrs. Beatrice Croft, sat in uneasy silence, their faces lit by the flickering fire. The butler, Hawkins, hovered near the door, his hands clasped tightly, as if bracing for scrutiny. Poirot's eyes swept over them, his voice cutting through the tension. "Mes amis, the locket is the heart of this mystery, and Clara its guardian. She discovered a truth that threatened someone in this room. Tonight, we will expose it." His words sparked a ripple of unease, with Amelia's eyes darting to Eleanor and Lang's fingers tightening on his chair. Poirot began with Mrs. Croft, whose sharp tongue had hinted at secrets throughout the weekend. "Madame, you spoke of rumours about Lord Blackwood's death. Did these rumours mention Clara's role, or perhaps a document she held?" Croft's smirk faded, her eyes narrowing. "I heard whispers that Clara had evidence, letters perhaps, that could ruin the Blackwood name. She was seen arguing with Lord Blackwood before she vanished." "That's all I know." Her tone was defiant, but Poirot sensed she was holding back, her gossip a shield for deeper knowledge. Turning to Dr. Lang, Poirot's voice grew sharper. "Monsieur, your diary detailed cyanide experiments, and you knew Clara in India. Did she share this evidence with you, or did you help her hide it?" Lang's face hardened, his voice cold. "I told you our work was academic. If Clara had evidence, she never shared it with me. I'm no killer, Poirot. Yet his steady gaze faltered for a moment, and Poirot noted it. Suspecting Lang's connection to Clara ran deeper than he admitted. Amelia, unable to stay silent, burst out, "Clara wouldn't have trusted just anyone!" She was scared, but she was smart. If she hid something, it's in this house, and someone here knows where. Her words were directed at Eleanor, who flinched, her hands twisting her shawl. Poirot seized the moment, producing the rose-etched key. "Madame Eleanor, this key unlocked a box with Clara's note. You said she was your friend, yet you kept silent about her fears. Why?" Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I was ashamed," she whispered. "Clara loved someone she shouldn't have. My husband, Lord Blackwood. I found out just before she left. I thought she ran away from guilt, not danger." The confession hung heavy, and Hawkins, still by the door, shifted uncomfortably. Poirot's gaze locked onto him. "Monsieur Hawkins, you suggested I search the greenhouse, where we found Clara's box. You knew her well, no? What did she confide in you?" The butler's face paled, his voice barely audible. She told me she'd hidden something to protect Lady Eleanor. Said it was about the master's death, but I swore to keep quiet. I thought it was over." His admission sent a shock through the room, and Amelia gasped. "You knew she was in danger and did nothing." Before Hawkins could respond, a loud crash echoed from upstairs, followed by Japp's shout. The group rushed to Julian's room, finding the window shattered and the young man gone, the quilt thrown aside. Japp cursed, pointing to muddy footprints leading outside. "He's been taken, or he's running again," he barked, organizing a search. Poirot, however, lingered, noticing a scrap of paper on the floor, torn from a notebook. It read, "The Locket's truth is in the crypt." The handwriting was shaky, likely Julian's, and Poirot's pulse quickened. The manor's crypt, buried beneath the chapel, was an unexamined corner of the estate. Leading Japp and the guests to the chapel, a crumbling stone structure behind the manor, Poirot descended into the crypt, its air damp and heavy with the scent of decay. The flashlight revealed rows of Blackwood family tombs, their names etched in weathered stone. At the far end, a small alcove held a locked iron box, its lock bearing the same rose design as the key. With a click, Poirot opened it, revealing a bundle of documents, letters between Lord Blackwood and Sir Reginald, detailing a scheme to falsify the manor's deeds to cover debts. A final note in Clara's hand read, "I saw them plan it. The locket holds my proof. If I die, expose them." The documents confirmed Clara had uncovered a fraud that could have ruined the Blackwood legacy. As Poirot read aloud, Eleanor collapsed into a chair, sobbing. "I didn't know," she said. "Clara must have tried to warn me, but I was blind." Croft's eyes gleamed with triumph, as if she'd known all along, while Lang's face remained unreadable. Hawkins, trembling, admitted, "I helped Clara hide the locket in the crypt, but I never thought it would come to this." Poirot's mind raced. The locket's photograph was the proof, a silent witness to the fraud, and someone had killed to keep it buried. The search for Julian resumed, but the crypt's revelation shifted the mystery's weight. The killer was cornered, their motive tied to the Blackwood fortune and Clara's discovery. As the fog thickened outside, Poirot clutched the documents, knowing the next move would bring the murderer into the light. The locket's truth was out, and the final act of this deadly drama was about to unfold. Chapter 9. The Trap closes. The crypt beneath Blackwood Manor's chapel exhaled a chill that seeped into the bones, its stone walls echoing with the weight of the secrets just unearthed. Hercule Poirot held the damning documents from the iron box, their faded ink exposing a fraud that had cost Clara her life and now threatened another. The letters between Lord Blackwood and Sir Reginald, detailing their scheme to falsify the manor's deeds, were a motive for murder, and the locket's photograph, Clara's proof, had sparked a deadly chain of events. Julian's disappearance, marked by the cryptic note about the crypt, suggested he was either a victim or a desperate fugitive. Poirot's little grey cells hummed, sensing the killer's panic as the truth surfaced. The trap was closing, but the final move required precision. Back in the drawing room, the guests gathered under the watchful eye of Inspector Japp, whose men scoured the foggy grounds for Julian. The air was thick with distrust, each face a mask of fear or calculation. Lady Eleanor sat rigidly, her tear-streaked face betraying her struggle to process Clara's sacrifice. Amelia Hart clutched her sister's photograph, her eyes burning with resolve to see justice done. Dr. Victor Lang leaned against the mantel, his calm demeanour a stark contrast to Mrs. Beatrice Croft's restless pacing, her sharp gaze darting between the others. The butler, Hawkins, stood by the door, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. Poirot, holding the documents, addressed them with quiet authority. Mes amis, the Locket's truth is revealed. A fraud that enriched Lord Blackwood and Sir Reginald at the cost of Clara's life. Someone here killed to protect that secret, and now seeks to silence young Julian. Japp, his patience fraying, brandished the documents. These prove motive, but we need evidence of the act. Whoever poisoned Reginald and tried to do the same to Julian is in this room. His accusation drew a gasp from Amelia, who pointed at Lang. You knew Clara's work with poisons, Doctor. You could have mixed the cyanide without a trace. Lang's eyes flashed, but his voice remained steady. I'm a healer, not a murderer, Miss Hart. Accuse me if you like, but where's your proof? Croft, seizing the moment, chimed in. What about Hawkins? He knew where Clara hid things, didn't he? Awfully convenient, lurking in the shadows. The butler flinched, muttering, I only helped her hide the locket, nothing more. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the accusations. The killer, they are clever, but not invisible. Let us consider the sequence, no? The locket reappears, Reginald dies, Julian is attacked, all to bury Clara's evidence. But why now? His eyes locked onto Eleanor. Madame, you said Clara loved your husband. Did she threaten to expose his fraud? Eleanor shook her head, her voice trembling. She never told me, but I found a letter from her after she vanished, begging forgiveness. I thought it was about her feelings for him, not this. Her words hinted at a deeper betrayal, and Poirot's mind turned to the possibility that Clara's love had been a weapon used against her. A sudden shout from the garden interrupted the interrogation. One of Japp's men burst in, breathless. We found Julian, sir, in the old stables, tied up, but alive. The group followed, their footsteps crunching on the gravel as they reached the stables, where Julian sat shivering, ropes still loose around his wrists. His eyes were wide with fear, and he stammered, Someone grabbed me in my room, said I'd end up like Clara if I talked. Poirot knelt beside him, his voice soothing. Monsieur, what did you mean, the locket proves it? Julian swallowed hard. I found Clara's diary in the attic, hidden in a trunk. It said she saw my uncle and Reginald forge the deeds, and she kept the locket's photograph as proof. I was going to tell you, but someone knocked me out. The diary's mention sent Poirot's thoughts racing. He turned to Japp. We must find this diary, Inspector. It is the final piece. The group returned to the attic, where a thorough search uncovered a small, leather-bound book tucked inside a hollowed-out Bible. Clara's diary detailed her discovery of the fraud, her confrontation with Lord Blackwood, and her fear of Reginald's ruthlessness. One entry stood out. Reginald threatened me tonight. He knows I have the locket. If I disappear, look to the one who serves in silence. The words pointed to Hawkins, whose face drained of colour as Japp read the entry aloud. Confronted, Hawkins broke, his voice cracking. I didn't kill her. I loved Clara, but she was going to ruin everything. I told Reginald where she hid the locket, thinking he'd just take it. I didn't know he'd make her disappear. His confession revealed a tragic complicity, but Poirot shook his head. Non, Monsieur Hawkins, you did not poison Reginald or Julian. Your guilt is in silence, not murder. The butler collapsed, sobbing, as Japp ordered him detained for questioning. Poirot turned to the others, his gaze piercing. The killer is among us still, desperate to bury Clara's truth. The diary, the locket, the attacks, all point to one who fears exposure. His eyes lingered on Lang, whose composure was cracking, and Croft, whose smirk had vanished. The room felt smaller, the air charged with the imminent unmasking of the murderer. As the night deepened, Poirot knew the final confrontation was near. The Locket's curse ready to claim its last victim, or its justice. Chapter 10. The final truth. The storm broke over Blackwood Manor, rain lashing the windows as thunder rumbled like a judge's gavel. In the drawing-room, Hercule Poirot stood before the assembled guests, Lady Eleanor, Miss Amelia Hart, Dr. Victor Lang, Mrs. Beatrice Croft, and a shaken Julian Blackwood, now recovered, but guarded by Inspector Japp's men. The butler, Hawkins, sat handcuffed in a corner, his head bowed after confessing his role in Clara's disappearance. Clara's diary, the locket, the forged deeds, and the rose-etched key lay on the table, each a piece of a puzzle that had claimed lives and threatened more. The air crackled with anticipation, the guests' eyes fixed on Poirot as he prepared to unveil the killer. "Mes amis," he began, his voice steady, "the locket's curse ends tonight. The truth, it is a light that no shadow can escape." Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. This mystery began with Clara, a woman who loved too deeply and knew too much. She discovered a fraud. Lord Blackwood and Sir Reginald falsified the manor's deeds to cover debts, enriching themselves at the cost of others. Clara, loyal to Lady Eleanor, hid proof in the Locket's photograph, a silent witness to their crime. But her discovery cost her life. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. Someone ensured Clara vanished, and when the locket resurfaced, that same hand killed Sir Reginald and tried to silence Julian, fearing the past would unravel. He turned to Hawkins, whose sobs had quieted. "You, monsieur, betrayed Clara's trust, telling Sir Reginald where she hid the locket. You thought he would only take it, but he ensured her silence, permanently. Clara did not run away. She was murdered." Hawkins nodded, tears streaming. "I didn't know he'd kill her. I loved her, but I was weak." Poirot's gaze softened briefly, then hardened as he faced the others. But Hawkins did not poison Reginald or attack Julian. The killer is here, among us. Poirot picked up the diary, its pages worn from Clara's careful hand. Clara wrote of a threat from Reginald, but also of one who serves in silence. I first thought this meant Hawkins, but no, it pointed to another, one whose silence was a weapon. His eyes locked onto Dr. Victor Lang, whose face remained impassive though his fingers twitched. "Monsieur Lang, you worked with Clara in India, studying poisons. You knew her brilliance, her secrets. When she returned to England, you followed, did you not? To Blackwood Manor, where you became more than a guest." Lang's voice was cold. "You're grasping, Poirot. I told you, our work was academic." Poirot smiled faintly, holding up the vial from the greenhouse. "This vial, found where Clara hid her proof, bears traces of cyanide, your specialty, and the diary from your room. It detailed not just research, but a recipe used to kill Reginald. You were in the library the night the locket appeared, close to the whiskey decanter." Lang's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, his silence damning. Poirot turned to the group, weaving the final threads. "Let us reconstruct, non? Clara loved Lord Blackwood, but learned of his fraud with Reginald. She confided in you, Doctor, her old colleague, hoping for advice. But you saw opportunity. You coveted the Blackwood fortune, perhaps even Lady Eleanor herself. When Clara threatened to expose the fraud, you helped Reginald silence her, using your knowledge of poisons to make her death look like a disappearance. The locket, her proof, was buried with her. until someone sent those invitations, forcing it back into the light. Amelia gasped, her voice breaking. You killed my sister. Lang's composure cracked, his voice rising. You have no proof, Poirot. That vial could belong to anyone. Poirot held up the rose-etched key. This key, found with Eleanor's glove, unlocked Clara's box. The glove was planted to frame Madame. But you, Doctor, knew where Clara hid her secrets. You were in the conservatory near the greenhouse the night Julian was attacked. And the note in Reginald's pocket. The locket knows. You wrote it, hoping to stir chaos and deflect suspicion. Eleanor's voice trembled. Victor, is this true? You knew Clara was dead? Lang's face twisted and he stood, his calm shattering. Clara was a fool. She'd have ruined everything. Lord Blackwood, Reginald, the manor's wealth. I helped them, yes, but only to protect what we built. When the locket reappeared, I had to act. Reginald was going to talk to clear his conscience. I couldn't let that happen. His confession spilled like the rain outside, and Japp's men moved to restrain him. Poirot continued, his voice unrelenting. You poisoned Reginald's whiskey, and when Julian found Clara's diary, you tried to silence him too, but your dose was too weak. The invitations, they were your doing, no? Sent to bring the guilty together, to flush out any who knew too much. Lang laughed bitterly, his resistance fading. I sent them, yes. I thought I could control the game, but the locket, it haunted me. He slumped, defeated, as Japp handcuffed him. The room exhaled, the weight of truth settling over them. Eleanor sobbed, mourning Clara's loss anew, while Amelia clung to her sister's photograph, tears of relief mixing with grief. Julian, still pale, whispered, It's over. Mrs. Croft, for once speechless, scribbled in her notebook, her column already forming. Poirot, his moustache twitching with satisfaction, addressed them one last time. The locket's curse was not love, but greed and betrayal. Clara's truth has brought justice, and the little grey cells, they have prevailed. As Japp led Lang away, the storm outside began to clear. Moonlight breaking through the clouds. The manor, though scarred, stood quieter, its ghosts laid to rest. Poirot gathered the locket and Clara's diary, handing them to Amelia. For your sister, mademoiselle, let her memory be honoured. She nodded, clutching them tightly. As the guests dispersed, the mystery of Blackwood Manor closed, its secrets exposed to the light. If you've been gripped by this tale of love and murder, hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Comment below with your thoughts, and join us for the next adventure, where more secrets await.